If you don't understand interest, it will cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars by the time you retire. I'll give you an example. Let's say your bank is paying you 0.38% interest on your savings. That's the average in the US. And it's lending that exact same money to the US government at over 4%. Who keeps the difference? They do, of course. What a great business model for them. See, when you put money in the bank, you're not just storing it there, you're lending money to the bank. You're the lender in this scenario. They are the borrower, yet they get to set the interest rate, not you. That's your current account, your savings account, whatever sat in your retirement account in a lot of cases, and any cash that you've got waiting to buy something. We're the only people in this deal who don't get to say what our money costs or the cost of borrowing money from us. We don't get to set our own interest rate. So today we need to talk about three things. What interest actually is and who decides it. Why the number they pay you is never the number that your money actually earns, and how to be your own bank to solve all of these problems. So let's figure this out together. So how does interest actually work? In school, they teach you compound interest for about 20 minutes and then they never mention it again. So let's do this properly from the ground up, because everything else in finance sits on top of this one idea, interest. So interest is the price you pay for borrowing money. That's it. Say you want a car today. You'll have the money for it over the next 4 years or so, but you want the car right now because you can't wait. So somebody hands you the money today and then you pay them for the 4 years that you didn't wait. What you're actually buying is time, and it works in both directions. If somebody's using your money before you've spent it, then they owe you their time. So I'll give you an example. If your mate wants a car and you're the one with the money, do you hand over the money and take back exactly what you gave to him? Of course you don't. You want something for the 4 years that you couldn't touch that money because you gave it to him. So whoever does the waiting gets paid for it. Now, hold on to that thought because it's important. It kind of permeates throughout the whole interest subject. So especially when you realize every dollar sat in your account is a loan that you've made to the bank. Most people picture a bank as like a big safe with everyone's money in it, in little piles with their names attached to it. I mean, it's all on a computer these days, but you get the idea. But when you deposit $1,000 in a bank, they don't put it anywhere. They write down that they owe you $1,000 and then they lend it out to someone else. Mortgages, car loans, business loans, government bonds, whatever pays the most to them, that's who they lend it out to. A bank is not a place where money sits. It's a machine for borrowing at cheap rates from you and lending it at a much higher rate to somebody else. So your savings are somebody else's debt, essentially. And it isn't only savings. Same goes for your retirement account. Most of them hold a chunk in bonds, and bonds is just a loan with a certificate attached. Every bond in there is money that you've lent to the government or to a company in some cases. So the key to understand about interest is somebody is always earning interest on your money. The only question is who. So let's put $10,000 into a savings account and follow it for a year. The average savings account in America right now pays about 0.38% interest. That 0.38% is the national average, so it's what the typical person actually gets paid. On $10,000, that's about $38 per year. Now follow that same $10,000 out of the other side of the door. The bank lends it to the US government, which is paying roughly about 4% at the moment. That's roughly $400 that they are earning. So that is the same $10,000 sat there for the same 12 months doing the same job for both of you. You get $38, they get about $400 for lending out the money that was yours to start with. You could lend the money to the government yourself and earn that $400, but nobody explains that to people. We're going to talk about that later. Instead, most people are brainwashed into giving their money to a banker who essentially steals the interest that's rightfully yours. Remember, somebody is always earning interest on your money. You want that to be you, not them. Before we continue, if you want to see how I'm positioned for retirement, I've written it down in a free guide called How to Retire by 2036, which is 10 years from now. There's a link to it below. It gets you on my newsletter too. It's all free. So go check out the link below and sign up. Anyway, so you've got $10,038, and on paper it looks like you were up because you started with $10,000, except the price of goods and services went up about 3.5% in that same year. That's inflation. So take that $10,038 down to the shop, and now it only buys you about $9,700 worth of stuff compared to last year, which is absolutely crazy, but that's just how inflation works. So on paper, you've made money, but when it comes to spending it, you're way down. And this means that you're taking a double hit. The bank pockets your interest, the government devalues your money through inflation, spread that over your entire life, and you're hundreds of thousands of dollars behind where you should have been by the time you retire. And honestly, this is why I hate banks. They make $400, they give you $38, and they probably even charge you an account fee on top of that for looking after your money. It's like the biggest scam in history. Give a man a gun and he can rob a bank. Give a man a bank and he can rob the world. Anyway, let me relax. So you might be thinking, why don't they just pay more of that 4%? Why aren't they a little bit more generous? Because they pay you exactly what they think they can get away with. And honestly, it's because the whole system is designed this way. From when you're in school, you're taught to be a good little worker drone, get a job, put your money in the bank and smile. But this isn't good for you, it's good for the banker. A banker is never going to give you more interest unless they have to. That happens for exactly one reason, and it's when they need your money badly enough to start competing for it with other banks. This is why you get promotional high interest savings account. Usually they are capped though and have some form of limitation about how much money you can actually put in. But generally they don't need to compete for your money because they're swimming in deposits. Everyone bloody uses banks and they're so embedded into the financial system that you almost have to use a bank. So that 0.38% isn't set by accident. Somebody chose it and they chose it knowing that you weren't going to move, and most people don't move. Now the obvious thing to say here is fine, Nick, so I'll move it. There are accounts out there paying 4% interest. And you should, it's free money. You're currently handing it to somebody else, so do that. But the problem is, even if you find an account that's going to give you 4% interest, and you should, it's free money, and you're currently handing your interest to somebody else. But there's still a problem. Even if you find a bank account willing to pay you 4%, the bank is still going to be skimming something from you. They're never giving you anything for free. It's better that you become your own bank, and we'll talk more about that in a bit. First, let's talk about the Fed's role, because in reality, the bank isn't even the one deciding the numbers here. Remember, the bank takes your money and lends it to the government or as a mortgage, and they make around about 4% from it at the moment. But who sets that 4% number? The Federal Reserve, which is America's central bank. And one of their key jobs is to set interest rates. So they control the cost of borrowing money, because interest is the cost of borrowing money. So 12 people vote on interest rates. They meet 8 times a year to decide what the official interest rate is for the whole country until the next meeting. 12 people set the cost of borrowing money for 340 million people. And when it comes to setting interest rates, they have 3 options: raise them, hold them, or lower them. Holding them is pretty self-explanatory. We don't have to talk about that. That just means they hold them steady. But let's talk about what happens when they raise and lower them, because that's what's important. Let's start with them raising interest rates. If the Fed puts rates up, it costs more to borrow money, and everything moves with it. So your mortgage goes up, your credit card goes up, and what the bank pays you on your savings goes up too, but only by a tiny little bit because they never give you the full amount, which is great if you're a saver, but it kind of sucks if you're a borrower, which most people are a borrower. I mean, most of us have a mortgage, and the more you owe, the more it sucks. Now, what about when they lower interest rates? Well, the cost of borrowing money gets cheaper. And this part feels a little bit counterintuitive until you watch it happen. So when borrowing money gets cheaper, everything else gets more expensive. I know that doesn't make sense, but I'll explain it. I'll show you an example by looking at the same house. So first time around, interest rates are high. The bank lends you $200,000 over 30 years at 8%. Your payment is about $1,468 per month. Second time around, rates go down. $200,000, same 30 years, but at 2%. Your payment is now about $739 per month. The rate went down 6% and your monthly cost got cut in half. But nobody actually says, I'll take a cheaper house and pockets the difference. What they do is they go back to the bank and ask what they can get for $1,468 because that's what they could afford to pay. They were already prepared to pay for it anyway. And at 2%, $1,468 a month buys you a house that's worth $397,000. That's the size of your mortgage. So it's to save money out of your pocket every month, but nearly double the house. Now, you're not the only one at the viewing. Everybody has done the same maths. So when the bidding starts, every single person in the room can bid more. And it isn't just houses, by the way. Cheap money pushes up the price of everything. Shares, land, business, anything that people buy with borrowed money. So when you hear that they are cutting rates to help ordinary people, think about what a rate cut actually does. It's permission for everybody to bid more for the same thing. And the biggest example of this is what's happened for most of the 15 years after the 2008 financial crisis. Borrowing was about as cheap as it's ever been in history, and we ended up with the most expensive houses most of us have ever seen. Right, so that's your side of it. Now let's look at the other side, because there's a borrower in this that makes your bank look like a corner shop. The US government owes about $40 trillion in debt, meaning that they've borrowed $40 trillion from you, pension funds, banks, and other countries at roughly a 4% interest rate. In dollars, that's roughly $1.25 trillion a year that they owe. That's not paying any of it back, by the way. That's just the interest they owe, right? And there's one rule about debt that works exactly the same for a government as it does for you. You only ever get out from under debt if your income grows faster than the interest you're paying on it. If the interest runs faster than the income, the pile grows no matter what you do. Anyone who's had a credit card get away from them knows this feeling. You pay every month, you never miss one, and the balance is bigger at Christmas time than it was in January. Now, do that with $40 trillion and you start to see the problem. Now, remember what we said about who hurts when rates go up? The borrower. If rates increase, that 1.25 trillion that the government pays in interest quickly becomes 2, 3, 4 trillion, and not even the US can afford to pay that. And see, that is the catch. The Federal Reserve is trapped. The Fed will tell you that it has two jobs: keep prices stable, essentially keep inflation low, and keep people in work, keep the unemployment rate low. That's the official mandate, but there's a third thing that isn't written down anywhere. The Federal Reserve is the central bank for the government that owes that $40 trillion. It cannot set the price of borrowing money, interest rates, without also setting what the government pays for its debt, which means every time those 12 people sit down in that room, whatever else is on the agenda, one of the things sat at the table is the borrowing cost of the most indebted country in human history. And the only way the US can manage its debt is through interest rates. There's almost no other way out. Look at their options. So one, they cut spending to the bone until it's paid down, which means fewer roads, smaller checks, thinner services. People will revolt, so that's not happening. It's just not happening. Number two is that they just refuse to pay and they default, which means every pension fund and every central bank on earth who holds US debt gets royally f***ed. Also, the global economy would just collapse, and it wouldn't surprise me if it triggers World War III. So yeah, they're probably not going to default on their debt. Number three is you tax it out of the people, but people are squeezed dry already, and even if they weren't, try winning an election by raising taxes, which leaves you with option four. You make money smaller. So the debt shrinks without you laying a finger on it. It's like a magic trick if the magician was a psychopath. And I'll tell you why and how that works. So the government still owe 40 trillion. That number doesn't move, but the money halves in value. So that 40 trillion is only worth 20 trillion in today's money. I know that sounds complicated, but it's just like your $10,000. When you put it in the bank and then inflation hits it, it becomes worth about 9,700 in terms of what it could buy today. That's inflation. So they paid half of their debt and they never sent anybody a cent. At a 3.5% inflation rate, which is roughly what we are at now, money halves in value around about every 20 years. So they don't even need to do anything dramatic. They just need to let inflation run and wait. And this is the option that countries throughout history have always taken when they face this problem, because nobody really notices it for years. It's a slow drip. The people who pay for it are us. Right? Now, I know what you're thinking. Nick, they'd never devalue money on purpose. That's a conspiracy theory. So let me tell you about a country that already did it to its own people in living memory and got away with it completely. After the Second World War, Britain owned about 252% of everything the country produced in a year. That was 1946. America today owes about 120%, I think. So Britain was more than twice in the trouble that America is in right now, which as a percentage is in a worse place than America is right now. And there was just no way out. The maths didn't work. They couldn't tax it. They could not cut their way out of it. And defaulting would have finished them as a country. Britain would be over, kind of like it is now. I shouldn't say that. Anyway, so they didn't default and they didn't announce anything either. They just held interest rates below inflation for 30 years. Think about what that actually looks like if you're the one living through it. You're a careful person, you've got money in the bank because that's what sensible people do. Every year your statement arrives and the number on it goes up because, interest makes your money tick up. It never goes down. But every year the shop is more expensive than the statement is bigger. Year 1, you barely notice. Year 3, you think you're imagining it. Year 10, you're poorer than your parents were at your age, and you cannot point at the thing that did it because nothing was ever done to you directly. That is why when you go to the grocery store today, everything costs double what it did just about 5 years ago. But in 1970s England, it was worse than that. By the mid-1970s, their debt was down to around about 50% of what the country produced, the GDP. They cleared about 3/4 of the biggest debt in their history, and it's the people who paid. There's an official name for this. It's called financial repression, which sounds like something that happens to a country rather than something that happens to a person, but it's very much something that happens to a person. But it all comes down to manipulating interest rates. Just keep interest rates below inflation for long enough and your debt gets smaller, which is great for them because inflation doesn't hurt them. So which seat are you actually in? Here's the thing that almost everyone gets wrong about themselves. If you ask someone if they are a borrower or a lender, they'll say that they are a borrower almost every time because they feel the mortgage leave their account on the same day every month, and that's the biggest single number in their life. But if you add up the other side, your current account, your savings account, the bonds sitting inside your retirement account, the cash waiting to be invested, for a lot of people that pile is bigger than what they owe, especially as you near 50. Your mortgage has shrunk, your pension pot has grown, and the older you get, the bigger that pile gets and the more sits in bonds. And this is where inflation becomes counterintuitive. If you owe money, inflation is working for you. It shrinks what you owe while you sleep. The house stays the same size, but the debt gets smaller. If you're holding money, the same force is working against you. So you need to reframe that in your mind. In a lot of cases, you're a lender, not a borrower. And if you're a lender, you get to decide who you want to lend your money to. So let's talk about that using my portfolio as an example. My money is roughly 30% stocks, 30% metals, and 40% in short-term US government bonds. The bonds are temporary, and I'll buy stocks and metals with a lot of that cash eventually, but that 40% I have in government bonds makes me a lender. This is me being my own bank. If I put that 40% in the bank would lend it to the government anyway, or they'd give it out as a mortgage and collect interest that belongs to me. Remember, somebody is always earning interest on your money. I just make sure that that's me, and you should be making sure that you are earning interest on your own money. So as long as I'm holding that 40% of cash before I invest it in bonds, I am being my own bank. If you want me to do a video on how bonds work, let me know. So here's the whole thing. Interest is the price you pay for borrowing money, which means somebody's always paying it and somebody's always collecting it. If you're holding money, you're the one lending, and your rates get set by the people borrowing it off of you. And the biggest borrower in the world right now has 40 trillion reasons to keep interest rates below inflation for the rest of your life. So what do you need to do? You need to go and find what your bank is actually paying you. It takes 2 minutes to do. Then knock about 3.5% off. That's inflation. You knock 3.5% off of that number. And then if that number is negative, you want to go look into government bonds or other places that you can put your money, because lending it to the bank is about the worst place you can put it.